in, just click on the Zoom meeting link or call 669-900-6833. You'll talk to Earl, you'll talk to me, and you'll be talking to our guests. And oh, what guests we have. Tonight, joining us are Aaron Harvey and Rich Schepis. They are the co-authors of this magnificent book, Star Trek, The Official Guide to the Animated Series. Oh, there it is, from Weldon Owen Books. Now, you've got comments, you've got questions, they've got answers, or just witty comebacks. So now is the time to give us a ring and get this party started. Now, I know you're out there, and I want to, as we do each week, say hello. So I'm going to give it a look right now and say hello to everybody who's in the chat. Well, there's Kenneth, there's Stephen, there's Scott, there's David, and there's other Scott. We got two Scotts, dos Scotts joining us tonight. We got Leslie, we got Eli, we got Michael, we got Carlos, we got Pam, we got Barry, we got Alan, we got Jessica. Well, Stephen says a dynamic duo is back together. Well, maybe not. That's okay. I'll keep it dynamic for you, Steve. It's all good. We'll be able to do this. Carlos says, such a pretty book. And yes, Carlos, we are going to get deep into this book tonight. And there's Vicky and Jeff. And thank you, everybody, for saying hello. And I hope that you will join us, because now is the time. Call us 669-900-6833 or click on that link, because, hey, I can see you and hear from you at the same time. It's a miracle, right? So do that. We'll talk to you very soon. Now, coming up, New York Comic Con is this coming weekend. There will be a bit of Trek activity there with the official panel touching on Picard and Discovery, of course. And if you're there, say hi to Elijah from Priority One and Sue from Women at Warp, who will be representing the Roddenberry Podcast Network. And I do want to bring everybody's attention to next week's live show. Now, if you've been watching or listening for a while, you know that we like to blend real science with science fiction from time to time. And I am thrilled that next week we get to welcome an astronaut to our little show. Dr. Robert Thirsk holds the Canadian Space Agency record for the longest time spent in space, more than 204 days, in fact. So we'll have a conversation about the nuts and bolts of life in orbit, as well as the lessons learned while he was there. And yes, there is a Star Trek tie-in, primarily in terms of leadership and cooperation and space. So join us for what will be a fascinating conversation. That will be live Tuesday, October 8th at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here at facebook.com/missionlogpod or at youtube.com/roddenberryprod. Let's jump over to the poll question, shall we? Last week, we also had a scientist on, Dr. Robert Hurt, and we had a science-themed question for all of you. And that question was, how important is scientific accuracy in science fiction? Split pretty evenly. 48% of you said very, 52% of you said not very. Be interested to hear some of the details on that. I think a lot of people were making the case for the idea that, well, you can only get so far with real science, but sometimes you just have to swallow a whole bunch of non-science to at least get the story going in the way the story needs to go. But they want some plausibility at the background of it all. Now, this week, since we're talking about the animated series, well, this seemed like a natural. We had to ask all of you, which animated Star Trek character would you rather see in live action Star Trek? Now, the last time I looked, we had a choice between two, Maress and Erix. And Maress was leading with 57%. Poor Erix with only 43%. We'll talk about maybe how I feel about that, maybe how our guests feel about that in just a second. So again, everybody, give us a call. Pick up the phone, dial 669-900-6833, or click on the Zoom meeting link, and Earl will patch you in. Without further ado, let's talk about Star Trek, the animated series. Yes, that much maligned, unfairly overlooked, but I tell you, it's had a bit of a renaissance in the last few years. And in fact, I'm so into it that I was listening to the soundtrack as I was writing my notes for tonight's show. I was doing that on repeat several times because it's only 15 minutes long, but it is a great 15 minutes. And here to shed some more light on TAS, our special guests, welcome Aaron Harvey and Rich Schepis. Friend Aaron, friend Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey.
It's 22 minutes, not 15 minutes.
Well, now wait a minute. There are two YouTube listings for it. One is about 1540. The other one's about 19 and some change. And the only difference I could tell is that they dropped the titles again at the end. So
I'm going through the recreated La La Land soundtrack that was for the 50th anniversary.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm using.
All right.
And John,
hey,
I did use that. I actually played that a lot while I was writing because I just loved it. Yeah.
How good is that? You have the action music. That's my favorite. I always look forward to the action music in there. Yes, it's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Rich, let me start with you. We always ask our guests to tell us a bit about their Trek fandom, and I'm just curious the nutshell version of it. What got you into Trek, and what got you here?
My mom got me into Trek. Actually, I just remember one of my earliest memories watching Star Trek in syndication with my mom, and I remember having the old Mego Scotty figure. I don't know if I had the others. I'm probably sure I did, but for some reason that red shirt stuck out, and luckily I didn't demolish him or destroy him, so he lived to tell the tale. And then I was always a Trekkie. Growing up in Philadelphia, we watched it in reruns, before Next Generation. So you saw every episode a lot. I was lucky. I was in the major market, so it was always on. And then TNG came on, and I was actually in high school then and college, so I was in for it a little bit and out for it for a little bit, but just stayed with it. Loved Star Trek, and then eventually my professional career as a writer, and I enjoyed doing Trek movie for I think about a year, and that's how Aaron and I met. And from there, I just I was always been a Star Trek fan, but then it was like the perfect marriage because now I could do something I love to do with something that I love, and that's how I ended up working on the book.
Nice. And then Aaron, same question to you.
I started watching it with my grandfather, Star Trek, and I remember when the original series would run in reruns and the animated series was new or newly rerunning. And as a kid, I'd always confuse like which one was going to be which because I didn't understand programming. That it was like, oh, it's 10 a.m. on Saturday morning. That does not mean the live action one will be on. And so I would always, because that intro is to a kid, a really young kid, it looks very similar to the live action one. So it was always confusing. But no, I was always a Star Trek fan. Like I said, I was kind of, my grandfather brought me into it. And then more so of a fan after Star Wars came out because my grandmother was confused and always bought me Star Trek stuff when I clearly wanted Star Wars things. So
right.
I got all sorts. And even I think that was just the universe telling me, no, this way.
Yes. Aaron, I think we're losing you a little bit. So from time to time, you seem to be dropping out a little bit. But yeah, I wanted to mention that, so you and I are around the same age. And there was a time there in the mid 70s where the original series was in heavy rerun. TAS was new or had just been new. So Star Trek merchandising, everything Star Trek was this weird kind of blend of the two. Like the Mego action figures and play sets, the color forms. I remember the color forms very well. It just sort of all of that visually was very much the same. But at the same time, a lot of what was being written about Star Trek kind of segregated TAS with TOS. So this is really the first time that we've had an official book solely dedicated to the animated series. And did you guys go to CBS? Did CBS come to you and say, oh, hey, it's 45 years later, we should have this?
Hey, it sounds like John was reading our pitch there, Aaron. Yeah, Aaron and I, we were both in a spot where, we love what we do and we love doing it with the websites. And, we just knew it was like time, let's take this to the next step. And how do we do that? And, we both recognized the animated series was such a great piece of Star Trek history, is such a great piece of Star Trek history that really hasn't been explored or given its due. So Aaron and I sat down and we put together a pitch, and originally we were trying to figure out who was going to, we were trying to figure out, all right, how do we get in front of John Van Sitter's face? Because that's going to be the goal. Because, otherwise, like Aaron and I would say is like, all right, some intern's going to get it. It's going to sit in a folder and it's going to sit on a desk. that intern leaves the internship, and then 20 years from now, somebody's going to find the pitch.
Yeah.
And then Aaron you had a couple different people that you knew. Was it Dave Rossi?
Yeah, Dave Rossi, Dayton Ward, just basically kind of and my IDW connections, which turned out to be very
Mike
advantageous
Johnson.
because So, but we both knew Mike.
It was funny too, because with Mike, he was like, when I talked to Mike on the phone, I just said, hey, I just want to let you know we're doing this project. And I was all excited. And I said, would you mind taking a look at it for us? I wasn't even thinking of asking him to like be the handoff person, because I didn't really think of it like that. And I said, yeah, no problem. And then he read the pitch and he was all excited. He goes, I want to buy this book. And he's like, would you like me to hand it to John for you guys? And we're like, oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
That's okay.
So we knew, though, in order for this book to be a success, it had to be licensed by CBS. I mean, the animated series, the joy of it is that visual joy as well. And if you're going to do a book on the animated series, it has to have a heavy visual component. And luckily, we had the best designer out there who, as you can see, John, that book laid out is just unbelievable. It makes the book. Yes. It's like the
thank you.
It doesn't matter what other ingredients are in there if you don't like what you're looking at. And so Mike Johnson really he'd be the first guy, right, Aaron? I think that he gets a lot of that credit for helping us.
For sure. And then after that, I think it was like a cascade of coincidences and like good luck, where it was just, we basically get the, it could take 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, or never speech, followed by like shortly afterwards an email with like, oh, we have somebody who wants to buy it. Like, what? Yeah. It was just like we had set our alarms to or our calendars to check back in December of that year. And it was just, I think just a month or two later that they had like all this stuff going. It was just, it was basically a something that never happened. So when I had a friend who wanted me to talk to his class about writing a book. I'm like, I don't want them to hear this story because they're going to think it's that easy, and it's not. It's just, this cascade of really good luck. But yeah, no, it was, I think it was the right time. There's a lot to do with the 45th anniversary. It just happened. We were moving into an era where Star Trek itself was just coming back, and we're in a culture where everybody collects everything, and you have to have, basically everybody wants all the knowledge. There's obscure YouTube channels about, old clocks and stuff like that. It depends. Right. So I think that it was rife for being explored, because it really kind of hadn't been. That's something we had been doing on my podcast. And the question we had when we first started that, we had like a poll question about what your favorite episodes were and stuff. And somebody added to it that's like, there's an animated series, like question mark, like people hadn't even known that it existed. And so I think before the 50th anniversary, it was a little bit more obscure. And now that we have a set of animated shows coming out, I think it's all having a resurgence. Well,
I'm glad that you brought that up. There was somebody in the chat, Kenneth, who I think a few people have answered him, but he said something along the lines of not being able to find it, not being able to watch it. Boy, Kenneth, do I have good news for you. Now, they did a great DVD set of the animated series in around 2007, I think. That thing is fantastic.
2006?
2006, 2007. And then in the 50th anniversary Blu-ray set, you could get the remastered Blu-ray version of the animated series. It is currently on CBS streaming, on All Access. There are a multitude of ways to watch it.
Netflix.
It's on Netflix, and I highly encourage you and everybody else who has not seen it to watch it. They are great shows. We're certainly going to talk about the episodes coming up here in a moment, talk about what makes them special, what makes them stand out. So give it a look, Kenneth, if you're looking for that follow-up to essentially season 4 of the original series. That's what you're going to get. That's at least how a lot of people look at it. I also want to go back to something really quickly.
And here's the beautiful box for the DVD.
Yeah. They did a lovely job on that DVD set. It is excellent. There's good behind-the-scenes material there, too. Now, Rich, you mentioned the fantastic graphic design of the book, and of course, you were referring to Aaron's work. Just let us know, really
the work on the book?
Yeah, I know, right? Amazing. Tell us what each of you did, what each of you contributed to the book.
Oh, sure. I mean, the great thing was that it was a collaboration effort from the start, and I'm a writer by trade. I mean, I was an English teacher. I worked in I did public relations for college athletics, athletic communications for a number of years, and I just love telling people stories. I mean, that was one of the things that I loved being about Trek movies. So basically, I brought the words, and Aaron brought the graphic design and the history. And between the two of us, we were able to do interviews with people, which was awesome. It was fun because I like working with Aaron because we had different sets of ideas, but we also came to the project from different points of view. So maybe we'd be interested in interviewing Bob Klein, and Aaron had like these are questions he wanted to ask, but then from my writing background, I would always go in these questions, but sometimes he would hit things that I wouldn't even think of, and it was awesome. So it opens up other doors. Yeah, and vice versa. And it opened up other doors for us that, which collaboration, that's the beauty of it. When you get to work with somebody, you get to share those things and tap into ideas, that you didn't also have. Writers' rooms are got to be awesome for that because it's more than one person, it's more than one voice, and you can listen to different ideas and find different ways to do things.
Right. Hey, we have so many questions, so much to talk about, but I want to address something that is in the chat right now. Jeff has what is probably one of the most frequently asked questions about TAS. Is the whole thing about one of the production team being colorblind true? So because of that, we got pink tribbles, pink Klingon armor, etc. Who would like to address that?
Well, let me let Aaron address it because Aaron, I think it'd be fun for Aaron to talk about it. But I do want to preface it with something because I think it's really important. Because Andrew Robinson's little speech before and after the Deep Space Nine documentary, I thought that was great, talking about truth and about perception and about the truth through things. So it's funny because even after writing the book and having our notes from who we've spoken to, different people still say different things that work on the show. Aaron, why don't you take this the rest of this way?
It feels very much like trying to interview people about Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You ask them 3 different things and they ask 3 different answers, and you're like, how did this movie ever get made? So the kind of condensed version is there is somebody who is colorblind, but that person did not have any input or very little input on choosing the colors. The person who did choose the colors was colorist Irv Kaplan, and that was sort of his go-to color set. And I kind of thinking back, it's like TAS would be very different if it was just kind of colored, quote unquote, normally. I don't know if it would, like, some of it wouldn't be as memorable. I think you wouldn't have like all those crazy 70s colors, but he continued choosing colors all the way through until Filmation closed down. Because, the question that I asked Bob Klein, who is sort of our go-to animator, storyboarder guy, illustrator at Filmation, was, okay, if he's colorblind, wouldn't somebody over the course of the decades that like had the, I know that it was a very segmented sort of like art directors stayed in their lane and people didn't merge a lot, which is very different than a modern kind of creative setting. But someone by now would have said, hey, maybe He-Man shouldn't have pink shorts, and they're like, no, he wasn't colorblind. It was like, that was just that person's color choice. And that was, people might not have agreed with it, but that was the kind of the style. So that they had developed, and that's why that continued the way it did. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of color in TOS, obviously, but when you bring it to animation, you're losing a lot of texture and dimensionality. So when you've got a gray Klingon ship and you've got Klingons who are shades of gray and brown and black in the set, in their world, it would make for some pretty dour animation. That would not exactly look great, particularly when you lose things like shading and dimensions. So it makes sense that they would be a little creative with the color palette. So there's a little bit of truth there. Yes, somebody on staff is colorblind, but that wasn't the decision maker just saying, oh, I'm going to make this whatever I feel like.
Well, and related to that, we had.
You know what's funny? Wait, John, it was the decision maker because Irv Kaplan decided these are the colors I like. These are the colors I'm using.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's what Bob told us. Bob's like, no, Irv likes these colors. This is what he's doing.
Yes, got it.
Yep,
nice.
And part of that, I think the whole urban legend that, added to it is you had Dorothy Fontana saying, "Oh, we had to apologize to
Larry
Niven about the pink Kazinti ship, and it was just so horrible." And we talked with Larry Niven, and Larry's like, "I've never had a problem with that. If you read the first book, wow, why am I forgetting words now? The story that the Kazinti were first in.
Gesundheit. Yeah.
Thank you. That they describe one of their ships as like a bright pink hull body and blah blah blah. So it was actually fairly accurate. He said their planet was very super colorful and stuff. He goes, I didn't have a problem with it at all because that's how I described them.
What's funny is probably means that Irv did all his homework and Dorothy did no homework, and that's how it got messed up. I'm kidding, Dorothy. I love you. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna leave now. Goodbye.
Right.
But yeah, so it's also one of those things that you're doing this 45 years ago. You don't necessarily that's like, oh, sure, I'll tell this story or whatever. Nobody's ever going to care about this,
Sure. So.
Yeah,
I mean, first of all, if you have a spaceship, it can be whatever color you want.
Right.
And second of all, Shannon in the chat says pink is an honorable color for a Klingon. Yes, because if the Klingons have
blood
pink, then it's honorable. Yeah, absolutely. So you're right, Shannon.
Good call, Shannon.
No question about it. So
that's the story.
That's great. Well, thank you, and I hope that cleared it up for our listeners. And thanks for the question, Jeff. I want to ask you guys. So you're fans of Star Trek overall. You're fans of Star Trek the animated series. What do you? I hate to make you choose like a favorite child, but what do you like better in animated that maybe works better there than you get in live action Trek? What do you like better there? But then let's flip that around as well and find out what fails in animation compared to live action Trek.
Do you want to go first, Rich?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the one thing I'd say about what works really well is exactly what Gene and Dorothy had said about the advantages of that animation for the show is just that you could go to these alien vistas. We got to see Vulcan, we got to see Vulcan's Forge. You could see different spaceships, like the ship in the premiere, Beyond the Farthest Star. It doesn't look like a ship that we'd ever see before. There's a great story about that ship in the book as well, with Bob Klein talking about designing it. And you're able to do things that a production budget wouldn't give you. As far as the aliens go, look at them. I mean, would you have been able to actually do that on screen in the time they had? And I think for me, the only downside is probably just, you have less time to do story. Although, in a way, I felt that helped those episodes because it was tighter, especially for the time that they had. Aaron, what do you think?
Yeah, I was actually going to say the advantage, I think, is actually the pacing compared to if you're taking a TOS story. Sometimes there is a lot of padding of just fighting or something where maybe that didn't need to happen. And if you condense that story, and you're also, because you're writing it not for children, but for an audience that might have children around, you've lost some of the romance levels of people going after each other too. So there's sort of removing that as a big function of a story, or there's still romance and love, but it's not at the drawn out sort of level. But I think
it's the Harry Mudd kind of love.
That's its own thing. I was thinking more like The Survivor or something like that.
Oh, too sweet.
Yes. She married a deflector dish. Somebody who can become a deflector dish. I think that one of the disadvantages, at least because of the specific animation we had. Now today, not as much, but you lost that the emotional connection between people with the way they look or movement or hand. You didn't have a lot of that. It was just sort of the same pieces reused to save time. So, and sometimes just putting their hand over their mouth, so they didn't even have to animate the mouth.
Right.
So, you don't have somebody giving a specific look like, okay, this means, go knock this person out from behind or whatever.
That's a good point, Aaron. You probably wouldn't appreciate the Bone Spock relationship or even the three of them together because of the looks that you would see in the original show. You
Right.
really can't mimic them in the animated series. So unless you go in with that
You have
fondness.
to have that it already in your head when you go in, and then it comes out. But if you've never seen the original series, you might not have picked that up.
Mhm.
So I would say that was the disadvantage.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's all fair. You know, the thing about the shows that always sticks with me is that pacing. That 22 minutes is really tight, because you're shaving off time for the intro and the outro, and you have to tell a story with a coherent beginning, middle, and end. And it's interesting that in TAS, very few of those stories feel padded. And in addition to that, there's a number of them that stand out that have big themes, that have big ideas. So talk to me a little bit about your favorite episodes or the stories that really stand out to you. I certainly know what mine are, but I want to hear what you guys say.
Good, Aaron, you go first this time.
Okay. Well, I think there's obviously Yesteryear, which is sort of the default, everyone's favorite, which I don't disagree with. I love the time travel aspect. I like that we sit to see Vulcan for the first time. There's all of Spock's backstory. There's so much of that has been mined or brought into the future and formed his character moving forward from that moment. So that's fantastic. But I think for me, I actually really like One of Our Planets is Missing, because it feels very TOS. It's got a big message about, just because something feels like a monster doesn't mean it is. It's got elements that kind of eventually came up in TMP and in different episodes of TNG and pretty much every Trek going forward. But it also has everybody on the crew doing something. They all had their parts. They got Uhura basically patched Spock into the alien brain. They had Scotty figured out how to take the villi that was antimatter and power the ship. You get to see the inside of the warp nacelle for the first time. So there was just a lot there that felt like, oh, this is a really good encapsulation of what the original series was. Yeah. And I think for me that one really hits home, because it has that Horta message and just there's just a lot of stuff in there.
Nice. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, obviously Yesteryear is always up there for everybody, and damn you for making me choose one of my children. No, the one that I'm drawn to more and more, especially after, and that one of the treats about the book, I get an interview. The writer of the episode, Fred Bronson, who went under the pseudonym Dan Culver, was the counterclock incident. From a Trekkie standpoint, getting to see the first captain of the Enterprise and being mentioned as first, that was a pretty cool moment for Robert April being on board. But I just love that. Again, that's a story that you probably can't tell on live action at the time. Everybody de-aging, and obviously hilarity ensues. And Kirk finds Uhura's hairpin to open up the sensor on the door. But I love the idea that here's Robert April and Dr. Sarah April being ushered off to retirement, and we no longer can do anything beneficial for the world. And then they are put in a position where they have to save the ship because they're the only ones who can do it. I think it spoke a lot. I don't know if that was something that Fred was doing deliberately, but it spoke a lot to the fact that our society takes elderly people and we sort of dispose them. And this episode showed that, maybe that's not the best thing to do, because they still have things to help us with, even if it's just institutional memory. But the other part about that I loved was that they were given a chance. Okay, we don't have to turn back. We could start all over again. Think about it. You get to live your life again. And and Fred even talked about the fact that there was a conversation about what they should do. And I love the fact that Robert says, I would never do anything differently. This is the life we led, and I loved it. And I think that was such a cool thing too, because as much as he was, obviously melancholy about having to, he's going to be retired and not have the same role as he would, being captain of the Enterprise, but realizing that, all right, listen, I've had my journey. It's somebody else's chance to have that journey now.
Yeah. I think that's a great message in there, and there's something really beautiful about Captain April's arc and having a life without regret. Also, dude, just get out of there and stay young and do it all over again. You're a font of knowledge and a great resource to Starfleet.
This is true.
Chris Riker
Also,
asked,
he made the decision for her, which was that's also something that would have happened today. Yeah.
See, exactly. Yeah.
And Fred said today that would not have happened. He goes, "No, I would never have written it like that." She would have been Dr. April.
Yeah, right. Yes. Chris Riker says, should real, and he has that in quotes. I think you mean live action. Should live action Trek get body shields and use the transporter to de-age characters? Hey, Chris, they already did it with Dr. Pulaski. You can just throw somebody in the transporter, boom, DNA, mix and match, and you got a young Pulaski coming out the other end. Body shields, maybe they don't look the same as they do in TAS, but what do you guys say?
I like the concept. I think it's one of those things that why wouldn't they have done it already in some form or fashion? You know, temporary, like emergency, like shield or something like that for like if there's a hull breach or something. It doesn't have to be constant.
Right.
Imagine if they had the animators working on the show with them at the same time, because you have these two groups of people coming from different aspects making shows. And they're like, well, what about these energy support belts? Oh, we don't have to do these big clunky, spacesuits that hide our actors completely.
Yeah. Pretty brilliant. Hey, at the bottom of the hour, normally we would drop in an ad, or in the past several weeks, we've been talking about Scott Palm, and we wrapped up his fundraiser. And thank you again to everybody who contributed. We will be giving you an update on that and his progress and everything that he's doing with the heroic curriculum in the Pop Culture Hero Coalition. But tonight is a little bit different. Gonna have a little bit of fun. I mentioned how beautiful this book is, how cool it is. And we want to give it away. In fact, we're going to give away a couple of these. So, don't get me wrong. I'm hanging on to this one that's in my hands. This is going home with me. But we are definitely going to give away a couple of copies. I'm going to give away one this week, and we're going to hold on to one that we will give away down the road, maybe at a convention, something like that. And Aaron and Rich have been kind enough to offer to sign it. So you will get a signed copy. Now, to make this fair, because a lot of you are watching right now live, but a lot more of you will be watching later, or you'll be downloading the podcast later this week. Let's give this 7 days. So next Tuesday, I'm going to draw a winner at random. And here's what I want you to do to participate. Going to make you work just a little bit for this. So the trivia question, and guys, don't spoil it. Don't just drop it into the feed right now. Wait until this is over. The trivia question is, who or what is the Retlaw plant named after? Now, that was an iconic image moment from one of the episodes. We're not going to get into details here. We're not going to make it super easy. Who or what is the Retlaw plant from TAS named after? But here's what you have to do. Not just answer the question. And I see you, David. Don't put your hand down. Put your hand down. Don't answer in the Facebook feed, okay? You need to go onto Twitter or Facebook and tag at Roddenberry, at Mission Log Pod, and the publisher of the book at Weldon Owen. That's WELDONOWEN. Put the answer to the trivia question there. Also, do a hashtag or just something in there, Star Trek the Animated Series, so I know that what this is all about. I'm going to take all the correct answers. I'm going to pick a winner at random, and I will contact you via Twitter or Facebook and send you your book. So that's that. And you guys stop. I see you. Yeah, I stop the trivia. Don't do it. Only on Twitter, only on Facebook. Remember, tag at Roddenberry, at Weldon Owen, and at Mission Log Pod. That's so I get it. But the answer to the question, Star Trek the Animated Series, who or what is the Retlaw plant named after? And you may very well get a copy of this book signed by the two authors. Now, those are our guests tonight, Aaron Harvey and Rich Schepis. And you, yes, you can be on the phone or live on video with us. All you need to do is pick up the phone and call 669-900-6833. Again, that's 669-900-6833. Give us a call. You'll type in the meeting code. Earl will patch you in. Or better yet, let us see your beautiful face. Click on the Zoom link, and it'll just be like us having a conversation like we're doing right now with Rich and Aaron. Click on the Zoom link, and you will be in lickety-split. All right. So, guys, let's go back to the animated series. We've talked about our favorite episodes. I didn't tell you mine. I mean, Aaron, you know mine.
Yeah.
Because I feel like
it's Adams as well, I believe.
Yeah, well, Magic's of Megas too, and here's the thing though, and how sharper than a serpent's tooth. I think they complement each other. I think they're bookends to a very heavy idea, and I think they play into themes that you get in a lot of Star Trek. And it was funny, of course, when I got the book, I immediately turned to the chapter on Megas 2. And it was so funny to see, okay, the writer had said, well, we're going to do a thing about God. Gene's very excited about this. Oh, well, we can't talk about God. We'll make it the devil. Then we can talk about it. Then we can slip this idea in there. And it always just amuses me how Gene would try to get these ideas into the show. And sometimes to great effect, and sometimes not so much. But I particularly love the fact that a show that's on at 8:30 in the morning on Saturday is telling these kids, look, this mythological or this very important being that you're told knows everything about you and will punish you in the afterlife. Hey, he's just a guy drinking beer, and
he legit is.
Yeah, he just needs to be understood.
Just hang out with some people.
Yeah,
friend.
Right, friend. It's a very subversive thing, and it's pretty great. Well, and it's funny, as I'm saying that, Brian is writing here, there's this conversation going about the relative adult nature of Star Trek. And I think we all mean different things when we say that. Adult meaning adult ideas, adult concepts. Certainly a show like Yesteryear dealing with the loss of an animal. You're dealing with death. But Brian says adult Star Trek. A devil-like being calling himself Lucian appears to save them. Lucian takes Captain Kirk and his crew to the magical planet of Megas 2, but when the Megans discover the presence of humans, they put them on trial the same way they were treated when they first visited Earth centuries earlier. There's a lot going on in that episode. So, And
it also helped me too, because I never really understood that the Salem witch trials were actually, beings from outer space. I think that's really cool to learn that, from that episode.
Right. Yeah, it's a fascinating idea. So, let's talk a little bit more about animation, as we talked about color palette and style. And there's something about the animated series, and when you put it in a context of when it debuted in 1973, certainly compared to where we are now, even though everybody working on this show insisted from the beginning, this is Star Trek. It's not Star Trek, but no, it's Star Trek.
It was even just called Star Trek.
It was, right. Calling it Star Trek, the animated series, didn't come until much later,
Yeah, home video release, right? I think, to designate the differences between the shows from on VHS.
Or
I think so.
The Animated Adventures of Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek.
Yeah, nice.
Having Star Trek first. Yeah, Star Trek, the animated series, The Animated Adventures of Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek.
Right. Oh, wow.
That's a fun anagram. Sort of.
Yeah, that's a handful,
It loops back in on itself.
but I wonder, animation, though, at the time is geared toward a Saturday morning broadcast audience. And we know that means kids. So you're making some concessions to that, even if the brain trust behind it is saying, no, we want to tell interesting, compelling stories. I wonder, 45 years later, animation is a method of storytelling for all kinds of stories and for all kinds of audiences. Was TAS just ahead of its time, or did a different production approach have made it last longer? If that was a time in 1973, 74, where you go, you know what, we're going to make essentially a PG-rated 2-hour animated movie just to keep making Star Trek. I wonder if that would have helped or hurt the cause.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really interesting idea. I think it was ahead of its time. I think it's always been ahead of its time, especially the original series and the animated series. And I love the fact that you bring up the fact, there's movies now, like you said, there's so much told in animation today, and without realizing they probably owe a lot to the animated series, because they didn't try to make a Saturday morning kids show. They made Star Trek, and then they exposed their viewers to these ideas. I like that about it. I don't know if, like, part of the charm, it's like Doctor Who. like the original series, CBS spent all that money and they did a great job remastering the episodes to sort of update the effects for new viewers, and you can definitely see the draw to that, but as a viewer, one of the old heads, I go back and I still like watching the original, the effects, because that's what I remember. And while it was cool to watch the Enterprise, shoot its phasers at a planet or something like that, or even when Scotty's using the phaser to weld open something and it doesn't actually shoot out, it wasn't about that for me. It was about the story and the character. So it didn't matter. So like even with the animation for the animated series, like the fact that it's like when we were rewatching the episodes for the book, you're talking about, like you said, almost 5 decades old. But I never really thought about the animation because again, it was the story, it was the characters. But if you were to try to tell a 2-hour movie with those characters in that animated form, wow, I don't know. That might be a little bit too much, like I try to go back and watch Heavy Metal every once in a while, and it's like I got to break that up.
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, and at one point, Leonard Nimoy was discussing in an article that about bringing the animated series to the evening, to like 7 o'clock time period.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of that was also, financially driven because they probably make more money if it was on an evening time slot. But I think had that show had the right advertisers and knew because it's 10:30 in the morning, they didn't really also count that, like, okay, there's a lot of adults watching, so all of the commercials, which is kind of the way back then, it was definitely their prosperity was based on that. It was all these kids' toys and stuff, and it wasn't really hitting all of the audience. If there was a different set of commercials or in a different time period, I think it might have actually continued on. And definitely if it was made today, it would have went past 2 seasons. Sure. And people always say, oh, there's this abbreviated second season, but that's kind of how cartoons used to be. They would do 2 seasons at a time. One was very long, one was rather short, and then they would rerun them for a couple years and mix them up because kids didn't know the difference between new and old shows. Which I always found really insulting as a kid.
Exactly.
But, it's funny too, because when I was a teacher, I realized I used a lot of pop culture references in class, and I'd always have to keep up on things because every couple of years you'd have a new group of kids that didn't know those other references before. So 7 and 8-year-old Aaron and Rich are sitting in front of the TV. Well, when we're 10 and 11, we're probably watching something else now. Although we were true Trekkies, so it didn't matter. We did. But the other kids, some other people were experiencing for the first time, which I think is cool, so you don't really realize that, oh, there was only 22.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, speaking of an adult prime time animated series of this era, a little bit later, Filmation no less, Flash Gordon. That was fantastic. And I didn't realize how good it was because I'm a big fan of Flash Gordon anyway, the original series and the 1980 film. But then I kind of went back, and I think because of TAS, I think because of Star Trek, just looking at what else had been produced and who was producing it, I came across a DVD of that, and it's great. So definitely, if you're a Flash fan or you just want to see something else from this period that has a little different feel to it, I'd recommend that. Hey, we've got Lou standing by patiently. Lou has called in, and we're ready to say hi to him. Lou, how's it going tonight?
John, is this the first time you've seen me?
I think it is, and I see you're wearing a Trek trivia shirt. Are you like a champion of Trek trivia?
I am the country's classic Trek expert.
Oh wow! Okay,
not your country.
Wait, which country are you in?
I'm about 2 hours north of Ken.
Where Ken is right now, or where Ken used to be?
Normally lives.
Well, he used to be in New York. He lives in California now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
If you're 2 hours north of him, you're an hour north of me.
I'm from Canada. Let's establish that now.
Let's
love
get
Canada.
A jelly donut and some Tim Hortons.
Yeah, man. If you could send us some Tim Hortons coffee, that would be fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, it'll be
Might
cold
be a little
by the time
cold,
it crosses the border, I think.
How about a bag of milk and some ketchup chips would be great.
Yeah. No, I was so big a fan and so good at the memorizing all the trivia that they wouldn't let me in, so I decided to start my own show.
Ah, nice, nice.
That'll show them.
Right. Well, welcome to the show tonight, Lou. A pleasure to meet you and see you in person. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, first I should say that, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the show before, and it bears repeating, so I'm going to say it anyway. It is because of Mission Log and you and Ken that I finally decided to watch TAS. I don't know if it was binge watching, but it was in the middle of when you were doing the recaps, and I thought, it's not going to take that long for me to watch this.
No.
I had a let's say I was setting the bar low because I'm not a big fan of animation or anything, and of course I saw Yesteryear first, and I was intrigued with that, and I just saw that of the 22 episodes, I'd say half or 2/3 were really well written, really intriguing. Because I'm big on as an actor myself, I'm big on the plot, the storylines, the writing, the interactions, and the character development. And I found a surprising amount of that, and I was impressed enough with that, and I stuck with it. I was quite pleased with it. I actually have. It's not a trivia question because I don't know if Aaron or Rich, which one would be able to answer a technical question.
That'd probably be Aaron. It's more in Aaron's forte, the technical part of it.
Because you were discussing this before, but I'm not sure if you answered because I had two feeds streaming at me at once, and I highly don't recommend that. If you use the transporter to put an old, infirm, dying, injured person in, and use their previous pattern buffer, as they did with Pulaski in The Next Generation, to rejuvenate them, or not one of our planets. What's the last episode called? I can't remember.
Counterclock
incident. Exactly. So why is it that they rejuvenate their body into the 20, 25, 30-year-old body, but they keep the memories that they have and are the same person that they were a few minutes ago with the memories of 70, 80, 90 years of living? I think that's a fair question, and I don't know if you answered that or not.
Lou, but I'm sorry, Aaron. I'm gonna let you finish. I'm doing a Kanye on you here. I apologize. I'm gonna let you finish. But Lou, you're speaking to the materialist at heart that is me. Thank you for posing that question the way you did. The mind is the product of the brain. If you rewire the brain or reset the brain, you are rewiring and resetting the mind as well. So yes, you phrased it just right. We talked about that in maybe in that episode, but I think we talked about it when they did the same thing to Dr. Pulaski at the end of season 2 of TNG.
That was so long ago, John. I barely remember what happened last week.
Well, you and me both, but I mean, that just happened to be one that I picked up. So sorry about that, but I just wanted to thank you for bringing that point up. Aaron, with apologies.
No, that's okay. What I will say is that in the novelizations that they had for these stories, in the Lorelei signal where they turned really old and then they used the transporter to reset them back to when they had first beamed down, they lost their memories. They were just suddenly like, why are we here? What's going on?
Now I need an explanation for the explanation. Now that seems to be a little inconsistent. No, I don't have any collectibles, Aaron.
They have novelizations of the animated series, and these are by Alan Dean Foster.
Foster. Yeah. I read them. Oh God, right, decades ago.
But if you, I think it's one of those concepts that would just have probably not flown really well trying to describe that on a children's or even like a cartoon show in that time period.
I gotta keep in mind that it was supposedly intended for a young audience,
right? But in these novelizations, they do talk to that. So in that episode, I don't remember what they did in the Counterclock incident, but I do remember that in the Lorelei signal, the time period that they were on the planet that they had aged and then they fixed them, that was just gone for them. They didn't remember it. So that seems more accurate to what John was talking about.
I guess then we have the not metaphysical, but the question is if you are ill or injured or dying, and you're in your 70s or 80s and have lived a full life,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the chance to be rejuvenated into you at 20 with no memory of what happened the last 50 years, would you take it? Because I was going to say yes, and now I'm thinking I don't know if I want to lose that lifetime of experience. And again, is that off topic, or is that a fair game?
Well, I mean, everything's fair game. That's a tough question, you know.
I mean, really, they had that question in the episode.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry, I didn't hear who's talking. Sorry.
Yeah, the characters had to address that question in the episode of Counterclock Incident. I mean, he had to decide, you know, they could have chosen to be younger and, you know, lived his life all over again, lived their lives all over again.
But they did have their memories, though.
But they would still have their memories.
And that's why I never understood why they wouldn't. They were satisfied with doing that. I definitely can tell you that would have been an easy decision. That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you lose, I guess it's more of a philosophical thing.
Here's the thing, though.
What kind of life you led?
Yeah, and if you take me at 70 and put me back to me at 20, but without the intervening memories, but time hasn't changed, right? It's still, you know, 50 years in the future. What it's still, right. I'm still living in the same year that my 70-year-old self would be living. Technologically, that's going to be a really interesting jump. If I'm working on my 20-year-old memories, pre-iPhone, you know, there's a lot of difficult stuff there to grasp. So I don't know, but
you could be speed taught with the implants that we'll have by then. So
even better. There we go. Yeah. Hey, Lou, thank you so much for calling in tonight. Pleasure to meet you. We'll see you in person.
I hope we're allowed to call in again, right?
Absolutely. We encourage it. Yes.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you.
Lou.
See you next time. Hey, really quickly, we'd like to remind everybody what else is happening on the Roddenberry Podcast Network. Well, you can find out everything at podcast.roddenberry.com. Well, let's see. You got Mission Log. You got Mission Log Live. The Priority One podcast, you can actually catch them live doing their show Tuesday nights at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So just a couple hours before we go live, you can go see a live recording of Priority One, gaffes and all. It's a lot of fun. Women at Warp, the Trek Files, Daily Star Trek News. The newest member of the troupe is Shabam. And by the way, I can't tell you, but Women at Warp has got a big thing coming up on their next show. So I can't say, but just trust me that if you catch their feed, I believe it's late Sunday night, early Monday morning when their episode gets posted. Oh, yeah, they got something big coming up next week. So Women at Warp and all the other shows you can find at podcast.roddenberry.com. Guys, I see that we're running up against the clock here a little bit, but some questions remain, and we'll hit the chat again. Jeff, by the way, you were asking which Flash Gordon, if it was Defenders of the Earth. No, not exactly. This is 1979. A 24-part animated series that was done by Lou Scheimer and Norm Prescott from Filmation. It was going to be a feature film, but then they narrowed it down to a series, but then they recut it into a feature called Flash Gordon, The Greatest Adventure of All. And it's cool. It's great. And if you love the 1980 movie like me, you'll see so much of the style and everything kind of cross-influencing there, even though they had nothing to do with each other in a production. But check it out. That was the Flash that I was talking about. Guys, since we are running up against the clock here, just a few last questions on the animated series. And hopefully we can do this again because there's so much to parse about TAS. Yeah. You did so much research for the book. I want to know what's missing. And I don't, you can answer that one way or another. You could tell me like, oh, there's this thing that I scanned or that we photographed that I wanted to put in that we didn't get to. But I want to know what's missing that you haven't found yet, that's out there that you're like, oh, one day, like that's the ultimate TAS sort of missing link. That's what I want to see.
Let's see. I would say because as we did the research, it's pretty conclusive that the idea that TAS wasn't canon was more a combination of people talking about not wanting to get into a lawsuit when Filmation was dissolving, and Larry Niven was going to start an RPG, and they didn't want to like deal with the Kazinti, and so they're just like, hey, just let's not use TAS for a while, which sort of mutated into this isn't canon, let's strike it from the record. And so I want some sort of definitive memo that either says yay or nay. I don't know if that exists.
I don't think it would exist because, like you said, it's years later, right? I mean, it would have to be written now. And we just wrote it.
But I meant from the time, because it's around 1991, before Gene passed away. It sounded like that was when that kind of happened. But Dorothy says no, and there's so much conclusive or so much evidence that it was just a convenience of not referencing it as opposed to being decanonized. And, you know, I know that when we did research on some things, the people who supposedly say, oh, it's not canon, actually got paid to do it. So it's like, I don't think they would, let's just ignore this, the thing that gave me a paycheck. So
yeah, that's a really tough thing to answer. I mean, of course, because when they're making it, the only thing that existed was TOS.
Right.
There is no promise of anything to come.
No, I meant in the 90s. When,
I get it.
When that rumor or that sort of whatever reason people think that it's not canon, whenever that happened, I would like to either see that exists or it doesn't. Have somebody say, yes, he wrote this note before he passed away, and here it is.
Yeah.
I know that was something that Aaron had on his mind when we were writing the book too. And, you know, like, he's like, oh, we got to get this in there. We got to get this in there. And it's an interesting idea. And I feel like, you know, even we've basically treated it as canon. And so it's like, it's in our opinion, and the way we look at it, it's a CBS official book, you know, and the episodes and even Discovery has gone and tapped into these things. So to us, it's canon. But because it's been this long standing urban legend of whether it is or not, it's always going to be up to debate for fans. You could show them that smoking gun memo.
Probably,
and
yes.
And they're going to be like, it's not canon. Somebody
no, we already showed them the memo that talks about the badges and TOS. No, this is your main badge. This is what it's supposed to be. And there's 2 production errors, and suddenly, no, that's what, like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You have to let they go. But yeah, I think that would, you know, for me, that's that. But we found so much stuff. I don't know what I don't know. I think that's probably what I would come on.
Yeah.
I know that there's a lot, you know, it's a shame that we didn't get the chance to, you know, obviously because of time, a lot of people probably have passed. A lot of the resources and artifacts, and I mentioned this in the book, have been lost to time. Look at the audio recordings for the original, for the music, you know, they had to take it off the dubs from the Blu-ray. So, you know, they're the kind of things that I wish we would have had the opportunity. It's, you know, back then they were making quote unquote a cartoon, so nobody was keeping anything, you know, and we're lucky Bob Klein kept all those storyboards. We were lucky that Gene and Majel, you know, kept everything they could. Right. But I mean, there's still so much out there that's lost. Look at Fred Bronson, man. I'd tell you what, like for me, that was those press releases.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, man. We got interviews in there that, you know, quite frankly, they probably never saw the light of day. I mean, because if you think about it, you know, if I'm running the Philadelphia Inquirer TV magazine, and, you know, I'm not spending a lot of moments promoting the Star Trek animated show at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, I'm going to be doing the primetime show. So all those quotes that he got and those great interviews, I mean, we got to include them in the book. And it's probably the first time they'd ever been seen. So it was like, that's pretty cool. So even though Gene couldn't be interviewed, even though Margaret Arman couldn't be interviewed, we still got to include their voices, which was pretty neat.
Yeah, right. Matt Jeffries talking about the drawing of the animated series ship. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. It's just See, that's super cool. Well, look, we could have a whole other show just about canonicity, and people who listen to Mission Log, they know my feelings on the matter. Oh yeah,
which are complex, and but at the end of the day, I always ask, is it Star Trek? That's all that matters. Is it Star Trek? Did it tell a Star Trek story? Did you like it? Cool. Keep enjoying. But remember, as Rick says, there's a 50-foot Spock out there somewhere.
Yep,
it's true.
Never forget.
He's just waiting. There's no movie coming out with that. Sorry.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, I guess all that's left to say is Mission Log Live is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Technical production on Mission Log Live is by the irrepressible, incomparable Earl Green. Be sure to visit podcast.roddenberry.com for the latest from the Roddenberry Podcast Network. Remember, it's Mission Log Live. But in addition to that, Women at Warp, Priority One, The Trek Files, Daily Star Trek News, and Shabam. If you would like to support Mission Log directly, well, that would be cool. Give us a look at patreon.com/missionlog. We got fun items there, including early access videos to your weekly Mission Log. Thank you to everyone who joined us live or later, and we will talk to you next week.